The morning sun slipped through the half-open blinds of my Burlington bedroom, casting thin, golden streaks across the sheets, streaks that felt more like bars than light. I woke slowly, my hand reaching instinctively for the warmth I'd grown used to after 15 years, but the space beside me was cold, untouched, a void where Sarah should have been. My fingers brushed the empty fabric and a quiet unease prickled at the edges of my mind. "Sarah?" I called, my voice rough from sleep, hoarse with a hope that dissolved into the stillness. No answer came, no shuffle of footsteps, no hum of the coffee maker, no clatter of her morning routine. I sat up, the covers sliding off like a shed skin, and swung my legs over the bed's edge, the hardwood chilling my bare feet. Something was wrong. The air hung too heavy, too hollow, as if the house itself held its breath. My heart thudded an unsteady rhythm as I padded to the bathroom. Empty. The closet door gaped open, revealing bare hangers where her clothes once crowded mine. Her boots, always by the door, were gone. The dresser top, once a mess of her earrings, and my keys stood starkly clean. A jagged truth clawed its way up my spine. She wasn't just out for coffee or an early errand. Sarah was gone, and she'd taken every trace of herself with her. My chest tightened, a slow burn of betrayal and confusion igniting as I stood there, alone in the silence of a life she'd abandoned without a word. It started weeks earlier, though I didn't know it then. A night that felt ordinary until it wasn't, etched into my memory like a scar I couldn't stop tracing. Mills Pub was my refuge after long shifts at Westfield Manufacturing, a place where the air carried, the comforting weight of aged wood, worn leather, and the greasy tang of fried food. It wasn't much, a squat brick building off Main Street in Burlington, its neon Pabst sign buzzing faintly, but it was where I unwound, where the world made sense. That night, I sat in our usual booth near the back, a cold Samuel Adams in hand, condensation dripping onto the dark tabletop. I'd been at the factory 10 years, grueling work, endless hours on my feet, but it paid the bills, kept our little red brick house on Pine Street humming with heat and light. Greg, my closest buddy from the floor, leaned across the table, his broad grin flashing as he spun a tale about the new kid at work, some jittery rookie who'd nearly bolted when the foreman barked his name. Looked like he was ready to confess. "To stealing the damn company's safe," Greg chuckled, his laugh a deep rumble that pulled the table into a roar. I joined in, the crisp bite of hops washing down the day's exhaustion, my shoulders loosening for the first time in hours. Then it happened. A shift in the air, subtle but unshakable, like a whisper I couldn't quite hear. My eyes drifted across the bar, past the regulars hunched over their pints, the football game flickering on the TV above the counter, and landed on her. Sarah sat in a shadowed booth near the window, her dark hair spilling over her shoulders, fingers curled around a glass of red wine that caught the light like blood. She was laughing, bright, unguarded, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard at home in months. My breath caught not because she was there, she'd said she was meeting a friend, but because of the man beside her. He lounged too close, his arms slung along the booth's back, his posture easy, intimate, angled toward her like he belonged there. Then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife deeper, she leaned in and kissed him. Not a peck, not a mistake, but a slow, deliberate press of lips that spoke of history, of secrets I'd never been let in on. The bar's noise faded to a dull hum. Greg's voice blurred into nothing. My grip tightened on the bottle, knuckles whitening, but I didn't move, didn't shout, didn't breathe. Inside, something fractured, a quiet, shattering crack that split my world in two. She didn't know I was there, didn't see me watching as her betrayal unfolded in plain sight, and I didn't give her the chance to. I set the beer down. The wet ring, it left a fleeting mark, tossed a few bills beside it and walked out, steady, silent, the night air biting my skin as I left behind a life I'd thought was mine. That night in Burlington, I didn't go home raging or weeping. I went cold, deliberate, a switch flipping inside me as I walked the empty streets, the chill sinking into my bones. I could have stormed back to Mills, dragged her out, demanded, Answers. Let the hurt spill into shouts and broken glass. But that wasn't me. I'd spent a decade at the factory, 10 years before that, hauling myself up from nothing, always weighing every move, every risk. Impulse wasn't my way. Patience was. Lying in bed hours later, staring at the ceiling's cracked plaster, Sarah's breathing soft beside me as she slept, ignorant of the fracture she'd caused, I replayed that kiss, her laugh, his arm, until the pieces locked into a truth I couldn't unsee. She'd betrayed me. Not just that night, but maybe for months, years. How long didn't matter. What mattered was the lie, the ease of it, the way she'd smiled at me over dinner like nothing had changed while her secrets festered. I didn't wake her, didn't demand she confess. I let the silence settle, heavy and final, as a plan took root. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of a fight, the chance to twist her story or cry her way out. Confrontation would have been loud, messy, and pointless. She'd lie, deflect, paint herself the victim, and I'd be left with nothing but echoes of her excuses. No. I'd leave, not with a bang, but with a whisper, stripping her of everything I'd been to her without a single word. The decision wasn't born of rage, though it simmered beneath. It was born of clarity, a need to reclaim what was left of me. I'd walk away, erase myself from her life as completely as she'd erased our vows from hers. But not yet. I needed proof, a map of her deceit to steady my resolve, and then I'd vanish, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. That night, as the rain tapped the roof, I lay still, her warmth a bitter irony beside me, my mind already miles away, plotting a departure she'd never see coming. The morning I left Burlington, the sun barely crested the horizon when I slipped. Out of bed, my movements quiet as a thief's, because in a way I was stealing myself back. Sarah slept on, her breathing deep and even, oblivious to the end creeping closer with every step I took. I'd packed the night before, clothes folded into a duffel, papers stuffed into a briefcase, my old fishing rod, and a handful of keepsakes from a life I'd once believed in, leaving the rest behind like relics of a war I'd lost. The house was still as I moved through it, the kitchen untouched, the coffee maker silent, no trace of my morning ritual to signal anything amiss. Her side of the closet stayed full, dresses, scarves, her chaos of shoes, while mine gaped empty, hangers, swaying like ghosts. My boots by the door, my watch on the dresser, the wallet I'd always tossed on the counter, all gone, swept away in a silent purge she'd never suspect until it was too late. When Sarah woke, hours after I'd driven off, she'd reach for me and find nothing, a cold sheet, an absent weight, a stillness that screamed louder than any fight. She'd stumble to the bathroom, empty, then the living room, her bare feet slapping the hardwood as panic clawed up her throat. The dresser would greet her with its barren top, the closet with its hollow half, and she'd call my name, her voice cracking into the void. James? But only silence would answer. She'd grab her phone, hands shaking as she dialed, straight. To voicemail, my voice flat and final. Leave a message. No texts, no missed calls, nothing to cling to as she scrolled, desperate for a thread. She'd run downstairs, fling open the front door, my truck gone, the driveway a blank slate, and the truth would hit her like a slap. I wasn't at work, wasn't grabbing coffee, wasn't coming back. She'd search, drawers, shelves, under, cushions for a note, a hint, anything to explain why her husband of 15 years had vanished overnight. But I'd left her nothing but the echo of her own betrayal, a lesson in absence she'd never forget. My departure from Burlington wasn't a whim. It was a blueprint, drawn over weeks with the precision I'd honed at Westfield Manufacturing, where every bolt, every shift had to fit just right. I didn't storm out that night at Mills. I went home, slept beside her, and started building my escape piece by silent piece. First, the bank. Our joint accounts had been a lifeline, my steady paychecks keeping us afloat while she flitted through her part-time gigs. I called the branch downtown, voice calm as I split them. Half my savings moved to a new account under my name alone, hers left untouched, a quiet severance she wouldn't feel till I was gone. Credit cards, closed, balances paid off. Her name. Now sole on the bills she'd never bothered to track. I'd sat across from her at dinner, her chatter about her day a dull hum, while I'd memorized the numbers, the deadlines, ensuring every tie unraveled before dawn. Work was next. I typed my resignation letter one midnight, the glow of my laptop casting shadows across our bedroom as she slept, unaware. Effective immediately, it read, emailed to HR at 8:08 a.m. The morning I left, time to hit after I'd cleared the state line. Westfield had been my anchor. 10 years of sweat, of overtime, of knowing the machines better than my own hands. But I'd lined up a job in Asheville, North Carolina. Smaller, quieter. A fresh start I'd secured weeks back through an old contact. The house, mine before we married, was hers to keep. I didn't care about the brick or the mortgage, just the freedom it couldn't hold anymore. Divorce papers came last. My lawyer, a gruff ex-cop named Tom, drafted them tight. Fault-based, every clause a lock she couldn't pick. They'd land on her doorstep hours after I'd gone. A cold, legal goodbye. By 4:30 a.m., I was packed, duffel slung over my shoulder, briefcase in hand. The ring I'd worn for 15 years left on the kitchen counter, its gleam a final taunt. I stepped outside, the pre-dawn air biting my lungs, and slid into my truck. The engine's low growl the only sound as I drove away. Burlington shrinking in the rear view. A life I'd outgrown fading into the dark. Weeks before that dawn in Burlington, I'd known suspicion wasn't enough. I needed the truth, raw and undeniable, to anchor my resolve. I wasn't the type to scream or smash things. Years at the factory had taught me to measure twice, cut once, so I turned to someone who could dig where I couldn't. Harrison Cole wasn't the trenchcoat gumshoe I'd pictured. Late 30s. Sharp suit, gray eyes that saw through bullshit. His office a cramped nook off Church Street smelling of old paper and strong coffee. I sat across from him that first day, hands clasped, voice steady as I laid it out. I saw her with someone at Mill's Pub. I need to know how deep it goes. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. You want confirmation, but you're already sure, aren't you? I nodded, throat tight. I need proof. He shrugged. Surveillance, photos, videos, timestamps, phone records if you want. A week, maybe 2, month if she's careful. His eyes held mine. You're not saving this, are you? You're ending it. I didn't flinch. Everything, get me everything. The weight was agony. Each day a slog through Westfield's clanging floors, each night a charade at home, her smile across the table a mask I couldn't unsee. Cole's updates came in bursts. First a photo, texted late one Tuesday. Sarah at the Ledger, an upscale spot downtown, her head tilted toward that man, their hands brushing over candlelight. My chest tightened, but I kept silent, filing it. Away. Then receipts, hotel charges under an alias, dates matching her late work nights, paid with a card I'd never seen. Texts followed. Screenshots Cole pulled from God knows where. Miss you. Can't wait. Words she'd never sent me. Her affection a dagger wielded elsewhere. Videos sealed it. Grainy clips of them at a cafe, her laugh ringing clear. His arm around her like it belonged there. I watched alone in my truck, parked by the lake, the screen's glow cutting deeper with every frame. When Cole handed me the final folder, thick with reports, photos, a USB of footage, I sat in his office staring at it unopened. It's all there, he said, voice low. More than you need. I didn't look yet. Drove home, waited till she slept, then spread it across the kitchen table. A timeline of lies, a map of her betrayal, every page a brick in the wall. I'd build between us. It wasn't just one night, it was months, maybe years, a life she'd lived while I'd been blind. That proof wasn't for her, it was for me, a lifeline to pull myself out. Sarah woke that morning in Burlington to a house that felt like a tomb. My absence, a silent scream she couldn't ignore. She'd stretch lazily, expecting the familiar weight of me beside her, but her hand would find only cool sheets. My pillow, untouched. James? She'd call, voice thick with sleep, a question that hung unanswered in the stillness. She'd sit up, blinking into the quiet. The hum of our life, my morning coffee, the shuffle of my boots, replaced by a void that pressed against her ribs. Bare feet would hit the hardwood, a shiver running up her spine as she padded to the bathroom. Empty, no steam, no trace of me. The closet would hit her next, half bare, my shirts gone, hangers dangling like bones picked clean. She'd freeze, breath catching, then rush downstairs. The kitchen cold, coffee maker dormant. My keys missing from the hook by the door. Her pulse would spike, a frantic drumbeat as she grabbed her phone. Fingers fumbling, screen unlocking. To nothing. No texts, no calls, just my number ringing to voicemail, my voice flat. Leave a message. She'd dial again, voicemail, then again, her pleas growing sharper. James, where are you? Call me. But the silence would mock her, a wall she couldn't breach. She'd scour the house, drawers yanked open, cushions flipped, papers scattered, searching for a note, a clue, anything to explain my vanishing. But I'd left her nothing to grasp. She'd call Greg. Where's James? His stumble. He quit. Didn't tell me much, would twist the knife deeper. The office next. He resigned yesterday, the receptionist would say, her world tilting further. Friends, family. No. One knew, their confusion mirroring hers. He didn't say anything. Panic would claw up her throat, choking her as she stood in the driveway, my truck gone, the street empty. She'd realize, too late, that I wasn't coming back, that her secrets had hollowed out our home, leaving her to face a truth she couldn't outrun. She'd lost me, not to a fight, but to the quiet I'd chosen over her lies. Weeks after, I left Burlington. I landed in Asheville, North Carolina, a town cradled by the Blue Ridge Mountains, its quiet streets a balm to the chaos I'd fled. My new apartment was small, a one-bedroom off a winding road, a balcony overlooking a sleepy corner where maples rustled in the breeze, but it was mine, free of her shadow. I'd traded Westfield's grind for a job at a local engineering firm. Smaller, less noise, less weight, a place where I could breathe without the past pressing in. Mornings I'd jog through tree-lined paths, the air sharp with pine. Days I'd work, drafting plans in a cubicle that didn't echo with old ghosts. Nights, I'd walk the town, coffee from a hole-in-the-wall cafe warming my hands. It wasn't grand, just steady, a rhythm I shaped alone, a life stripped to essentials where I could hear my own thoughts again. Then I met Anna, a Saturday at the farmer's market, her standing by a produce stall, inspecting basil with a quiet focus that caught my eye. She glanced up. Try the strawberries, best in town. Her voice soft, warm, a smile tugging her lips as she held out a basket. I hesitated, then took it. Sold. She was a teacher, gentle, patient, her days spent wrangling kids with a kindness that wasn't forced. We started slow, walks through Asheville's hilly streets, dinners at quiet spots, late talks over coffee that stretched into hours. She didn't pry, never asked about the scars I carried, and that made it easier to let her in. Within a year, we married. A simple ceremony under an oak tree, just friends, her hand steady in mine. A bond built on truth, not shadows. When our daughter was born, tiny, fragile, her cries filling the nursery, I held her, feeling a weight lift, a future unfold I'd never thought possible again. Asheville wasn't just escape, it was rebirth. Proof you can walk through fire and find something real on the other side. Months of peace in Asheville shattered one quiet afternoon. I'd stepped outside to grab the mail, Anna and our daughter off visiting her folks, when a car idled at the curb, unfamiliar until she stepped out. Sarah, thinner, her dark hair pulled tight, her face a stranger's under the weight of time. My hands tightened around the envelopes, pulse kicking up as she froze, eyes locking on mine, wide, uncertain, shadowed with something desperate. James, she whispered, barely audible over the rustling leaves, taking a hesitant step forward. I didn't move, didn't speak, just watched her shuffle closer, her simple blouse and jeans a far cry from the polished woman I'd known. I had to find you, she said, glancing at the house. My house, my life, a world she'd never touched. Anger flickered, but curiosity held me. How? She shifted. It wasn't easy. Of course, she'd hunted me down, her stubborn streak unbroken even now. I didn't want this on my doorstep. Neighbors' curtains twitched, so I stepped aside, letting her in, the door clicking shut behind us. She stood in the living room, eyes darting over photos. Anna, our girl, a happiness she'd never grazed, then turned to me, pleading, "Just a few minutes." I crossed my arms. "Say it." She swallowed. "I didn't know why you left. One day you were there, then gone." Her voice cracked, but I stayed stone. "You know why." She flinched, tears welling, and I pulled the folder from the bookshelf, a thick, plain thing I'd kept untouched until now. I handed it over. "This is why." Her fingers shook as she opened it. A photo spilled out first. Her and him, that man from Mills, laughing at a cafe, his hand on hers. She gasped, flipping pages. More shots, hotel receipts, texts dripping. With secrets, each one a hammer blow, her breath hitching as the truth piled up. "You saw everything," she whispered, crumpling the edges, eyes pleading for mercy I didn't have. "Hey, if this twist got you, subscribe now. Don't miss how it ends." Sarah stood trembling in my Asheville living room, the folder of her betrayal. Clutched in her hands, tears streaking her face as she looked up. "James, I still loved you." The words hung there, fragile, desperate, a plea I'd once have crumbled for. Her eyes searched mine, wide and wet, begging for a crack in the wall I'd built, but I felt nothing. Not rage, not pity, just a vast empty calm where she used to live. "Loved me?" I said, voice low, steady. "You loved what I gave you, a home, a life, while you gave him everything else." She shook her head, sobbing. "It was a mistake, I swear. I thought we could fix it." Fix it? The gall twisted my gut, but I didn't shout, didn't let it show. "There's no we to fix, Sarah. There hasn't been for years." She stepped closer. "Please, just tell me what to do, anything." Her hand reaching. Clutching air as I pulled back, the space between us a chasm she couldn't cross. I moved to the door, my steps deliberate. "You want to know why I didn't fight? Why I didn't scream that night at Mills?" She froze, nodding faintly, tears dripping onto the folder still crushed in her grip. "Because some things aren't worth saving," I said, turning the handle, pulling it open. "Get out." The cool air rushed in, a sharp contrast to the stifling weight of her presence. Her breath hitched, a choked sob breaking free. "James, please." But I didn't waver, my gaze fixed beyond her, past the porch to the quiet street where my life now thrived. She lingered, as if one more word could undo 15 years. Of lies, then shuffled forward, slow, broken, pausing at the threshold. "I never stop," she started, but I shut the door, the click cutting her off, sealing her out with a finality that echoed through the house. I stood there back against the wood, listening as her footsteps faded, each one a nail in the coffin of a past I'd buried long ago. She'd face her ruin alone. I'd already found my peace. Life in Asheville unfolded like a quiet promise after that. My days now a steady hum of routine, a world I'd carved from the ashes of Burlington. I'd wake early, jogging through streets where the Blue Ridge Mountains loomed soft against the sky, my breath fogging in the crisp air as I ran past coffee shops and old brick homes. Work at the engineering firm was simpler, less chaos, more focus. My desk a corner of calm where I drafted plans, the clatter of Westfield a distant memory. Evenings, I'd sit with Anna on our balcony, her laughter mingling with our daughters' coos, the lake's shimmer replaced by a new horizon I'd learned to love. Lily Grace, our girl, came a year after the wedding, her tiny hands wrapping around my finger, her cries a sound that healed more than it pierced. With Anna, there were no shadows, no lies lurking in her smile, no need to brace for the next cut. We'd built something real, steady, a family born from trust she'd never broken. Looking back, that night at Mills was a wound that taught me more than it broke me. I'd trusted Sarah too freely, let 15 years blind me to the cracks, her late nights, her excuses, because I'd wanted the lie more than the truth. Leaving wasn't just escape, it was survival. a lesson in silence sharper than any shout. I didn't need her tears, her pleas. I had the proof, the folder, the years of deceit laid bare by Cole's lens, and I used it not to fight, but to walk away clean. Sarah's world collapsed without me. She'd lost the house, the life I'd held up, but I'd gained mine. A daughter's laugh, a wife's steady hand, a peace I'd fought for. You don't owe anyone your ruin. When they betray you, don't cling. Step back, rebuild, and let them face the fallout of their choices. Standing on my Asheville balcony now, a beer cooling my palm as the sun dips below the mountains, I look, back on that Burlington morning, Sarah waking to an empty bed, and feel no regret, only a quiet pride in the man I've become. I'd carried her for 15 years, built a life she'd torched with a stranger's kiss. But I didn't let it define me. If the ones you love turn on you, don't beg. Leave like I did when Sarah's lies unraveled at Mills. You're worth more than their betrayal. Stand tall, walk away, and build something stronger than they can break. I was 40, a factory, man who thought trust was enough. Until I saw her lips on his, felt my world crack, and chose silence over screams. It hurt. Weeks of planning, nights of proof. But I emerged whole, a new job, Anna's love, Lily Grace's tiny hands. Sarah chased me down, begged through tears, but I closed the door. She reaped her emptiness. I sowed my peace. Family, love. It's not a debt you pay with your soul. When they push you out, don't sink, rise like I did, and live free. What's your line? When do you walk away from the ones who cut deepest? If this story moved you, subscribe now. Join us for more tales of grit and redemption, and drop your thoughts below.